What I like to do for my own self-care and well-being is to go walking. I enjoy just getting out and going for a walk, whether it's in downtown Beaverdam with Rouzie the little dog, or if it's someplace else. I enjoy walking on the beach. I enjoy trekking through the woods or climbing a mountain. And when I'm hiking out in the woods, I often wonder, who made the trails? Who prepared the way? Who decided where the trails were going to head, whether they were going to go this way or that way? It's always something I seem to wonder. Now, you guys know that I grew up Boy Scouting, and I went to Philmont, the high adventure camp in New Mexico, which is at the base of the Rocky Mountains. And I went on a 10-day backpacking trip in the Rockies. It was an awesome trip. One of the things that we did while we were on that trip is that we helped prepare some trails. It was just part of what you did to give back. And I can remember being there with the ranger, standing on the side of a mountain, clearing the next section of trail. He explained to us that when you think about making trails, you would normally think you just want to go straight up and get to the top as quick as possible. Making a trail in that format is not a good idea for a couple of reasons. One, it would be a really tough hike to walk straight up a mountain. And if you cut the trail that way, eventually the water would find that trail and it would cause erosion, and then you'd have an impossible trail. So what we did was we were making these things called switchbacks. You guys know what a switchback is? It's when you're going up a mountain, you go this way, and then you switch back, and you go this way, and you switch back, and you go that way. It's a gradual climb to get to the top of the mountain. And making switchbacks are difficult because you have to dig into the mountain and pull the earth out to get to where you have a flat terrain. Now, there were 10 of us on this trek, and we spent a half a day working on the path, and we only cleared about 50 feet of trail. So when you think about that and all of the mountainous trails that are around, preparing the path is a difficult one. But what I also learned about building trails at my time when I was working at Brady Saunders in Goochland. I worked at the camp during the time when they were expanding the camp. And there was this one summer where we had opened up a new camp office, and we built a new rifle range and archery range on the other side of the lake from where the main camp was. To get to this section, you would walk across the dam. It was a gravel road. You had the beautiful lake on one side, and like a 35 or 40 foot steep slope down to the creek at the bottom of the dam. The road was a long gravel road, and during the middle of the summer, it was hot and dusty. It was not one of those places that scouts really wanted to walk. So we were sitting in the office one day, and Bill, the camp director, says, "Taylor, let's go make a path. Let's go make a trail." So we grabbed some heavy-duty clippers, and we headed off into the woods. We walked out of the back of the camp office, and he says, "We're going that way to the activity field." It was a place where the flagpole was, where we held retreat every night. So we entered into the woods, and we started clearing our way. I came to appreciate some things on that trek. Bill's goal was not only just to get to the retreat field, but it was also to provide somewhat of an adventure for the kids that would take that path. So we wound it through the woods. We rounded a big tree and then a pile of rocks. And we knew that eventually we'd get down to the bottom to where the creek was, and we'd have to cross it. We did all of that, and then we started heading back up. And we popped out right at the edge of the activity field. Now, there was one thing that I really appreciated about that, and it was I realized during that trek, during that process of building the trail, that sometimes it's about the journey and not the destination. That just getting there is half of the fun of actually attaining the goal. Now that trail, we did that trail like 30 years ago, and the last time I was in camp, I went back and walked to that trail again. And I can tell it is a very well-used trail. Establishing trails and making ways for others reminds me of all the folks that have blazed new trails for us. Think for a moment about the early settlers of this country, the John Smiths, the George Washingtons, the Lewis and Clarks. It was their vision and hard work that built this country that we live in. And how about people a little closer to our time? There are others who have prepared the ways, but in a different way. People like Susan B. Anthony, who worked for women's suffrage, and Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., who were instrumental in the civil rights movement. All of these folks did what they did because they had higher expectations for those who would follow them. Higher expectations for those who would follow them. Isn't that what all of us want? We want the future generation, our kids, our grandkids, their kids, to do better than what we have done. Think back to those people in your life who have prepared the way for where you are today. Folks like your parents, your grandparents, teachers, mentors, coaches, those people who helped prepare you for the place that you are today. The ones that pushed you to be the best person, the best parent, the best manager that you could be. They are the ones that cared about you. And I would be willing to say that you don't want to let them down. You want to meet or exceed their expectations. But sometimes we fall short and we don't meet their expectations. And those that have prepared the way may start having doubts about our capabilities. They start thinking about what we are doing and if we are the right person for the job. This is where we find John the Baptist in today's gospel reading. John is sitting in prison, the same prison where he will be eventually executed. And since we left him in last week's text, he had baptized Jesus and was beginning to hear things about his cousin's ministry. He was starting to have doubts if Jesus was the Messiah that he was waiting for. Doubts because he was expecting Jesus to establish his kingdom in a way that he thought would have been a little more forceful. This is why John was sending his disciples, asking Jesus if he was the one to come, or should they be looking for someone else. Jesus responds by telling him, "Look around you. Go and tell John what you are seeing and what you are hearing." Friends, they were seeing and hearing the same thing that the prophet Isaiah told us in today's Old Testament text. That the blind are seeing, the lame are walking, the deaf are hearing. This was a fulfillment of the old prophetic text in the scripture. And after John's disciples left, Jesus validated John's ministry with those gathered around them. He tells them that John is more than a prophet, that he is the one that was written about when Isaiah wrote, "Look, I am sending my messenger who will prepare a way for the coming of the Messiah." John did what he was called to do, to prepare a way for Jesus. And Jesus prepares the way for us. Jesus prepares the way for us to be in a fully restored relationship with God. It is by our faith in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus that we can be secure in our salvation. It is by God's grace that Jesus came to be with us, to prepare a way for us to be with God forever. But this gift of grace has expectations. It calls out for a response. And that response for us is to prepare the way for others as well. Let me tell you a little story. I had a coworker named Brian who took a phone call one early Tuesday morning. I couldn't overhelp but hear part of his conversation. I could tell that something bad was happening. He hung up the phone, and Brian told me that he had to leave and that he didn't want to talk about it. He said that everything would be fine, but he had to go and take care of it. He came back a couple of hours later and told me a story. The person on the phone was his younger brother, Jake. And Jake shared with him that he realized that he had a drinking and drug problem and that he needed to get help. So Jake asked him to go to their parents' house and tell them that he was coming home and why he was coming home, that he was having problems with alcohol and drugs. So that's what Brian did. He said it was the hardest thing he's ever had to do. He walked into his parents' kitchen while they were having breakfast. They looked quizzically at him and wondered why he was there so early. And then he had to tell them that their baby boy, his younger brother, was on his way home and that he needed help. His mother started to cry. His dad shook his head and mumbled he really wasn't surprised. Brian prepared the way for his brother to come home and start the healing process. This, my friends, is what we are called to do as followers of Christ. We are called to prepare a way for our sisters and brothers to find their way to Jesus. I challenge you during this Advent season to ponder about how we can prepare the way for others, how we can serve the ones who are around us, how we can find new and different ways to show God's love to the needy, and how we can grow closer to God by preparing the way for others. Christ prepared the way for us and set the high expectations for us to love our God with all our heart, all our mind, all of our soul, and to love our neighbors just as much. This is the third Sunday in Advent, and we can begin to see the trail to Jesus' birthday come to an end. Christmas will come and go, but our trail, our journey, doesn't end there. We keep moving ahead, preparing the way for Christ's return. And I, for one, am excited to see where that path takes us. I know that trail won't be easy at times, and there may be switchbacks along the way. And I know we may stumble and fall along the way. But I also know that we can take comfort in knowing that we will not be alone. That Jesus, the one who prepared the way, will be walking right next to us. Thanks be to God. Amen. Please stand as you feel comfortable.